Hey, good morning, everybody. And I know coffee is still pending, so I'm going to try and keep the energy level high. Such pleasure to welcome you to this event. VFS is such an esteemed group. What an amazing history over 80 years, names like Sikorsky and Piasecki that are not just historical landmarks, but continue to innovate. For folks who are not from the Phoenix area or who don't visit very often, if you're wondering, is Phoenix always like this? The answer is yes. It never gets any warmer. I would move your families and your businesses here immediately. Hey, here in 2025, though, I do want to say there's a renaissance, and I don't think that states it too strongly, in the design, application, and research of vertical flight. The number of new designs, new OEMs, and innovations at the aircraft and system level are staggering. It's an amazing time to be alive, but it's a more amazing time to be in this industry. For an early career engineer or midterm or late term, I'm looking at you, Mr. Newman, the opportunities presented to you are a step change for maybe any time since the Second World War. And we need more design and manufacturing and simulation talent than perhaps in the history of humankind. And to achieve this, we need an ecosystem of schools, industrial players, and government partners, such as our wonderful Mayor Gallego, to ensure we're putting together the talent and the infrastructure and the regulatory environment that allows us to flourish. The good news is we have passionate and vocal advocates to help us do that, and a lot of them are here in this room. The maybe not so good news is there's a lot of competition. Maybe second only to AI, there's a global race to build a low-altitude economy that leverages vertical flight and all of the innovations that come along with it. Anybody have a news feed that tracks stories on VTOL, STOL? Yeah. You go 4 hours without news, without a new player, without a new mission, without some milestone. It's a staggering time to try to keep up. There were 32 eVTOL OEMs at the Zhuhai Air Show in December. 32. Just Chinese eVTOL OEMs, some of them with relatively sophisticated and mature vehicles. We can convince ourselves that not all of those designs are going to win the day. But if we look at the automotive industry, we should remain vigilant on how rapidly we can lose the recipe. So, what can we do? What can we do to make sure that we recognize the benefits and we're the innovators in this space? Suggestion one, don't stick your head in the sand. It would be easy to sleep at night if you convince yourself that these other vehicles in other development and other geographies will never get certified. It's not designed to 10 to the minus ninth. The FAA will never allow it. They'll never import those vehicles here. So maybe that's true. And perhaps that means they could only use them in the world's second largest economy, in the Middle East and in Southeast Asia and maybe India. They might accept that consolation prize and move right on. And then what? We fly to Dubai and we're wowed by the Wakanda-like step change in technology? We convince ourselves it must not be any good or we'd have it in Midtown Manhattan? So try it. Gather the data. There's no substitute for trying, adapting, improving. I was thrilled to see Amazon doing drone delivery in the West Valley here in Arizona, and I'm okay that they had to stop it to fix some things. We should view that as progress. We shouldn't give them a scarlet letter for identifying some roadblocks and moving past them. Waymo gathered millions of hours of driving data here in Phoenix that allows them to improve that algorithm, that allows them to improve those operations, to get better. Do we really think there's any substitute for what EHang is learning in Shenzhen, in Bangkok, next in Shanghai? Suggestion number two, stop talking about what we can't do and start talking about what we can do and what we can do faster. I get it, it's hard. Stop telling us why the current rules don't work. Stop telling us why the current government is dysfunctional or why we'll never get the support we need. What's the burning platform that gets energy behind this? What are the work streams we can take on rapidly without waiting for some sea change in regulation? Do we really need some exogenous event to push us forward, or can we all agree the current pace isn't going to work for us? Suggestion number 3, find passionate supporters, industry, academia, government, and make them a force multiplier. Whatever the motivating story is for them, tell it. Opening regional economies, reducing dull, dirty, and dangerous jobs performed by a distressed labor pool, improving national security. The technology is here to improve the quality of life for that shrinking labor pool, not to replace them. Educate those supporters on how we can use the current technology wave to solve our biggest problems and why being not just first, but first with an enduring solution matters. We have new leaders in DOT, FAA, DOD. How do we get that churn to drive energy and momentum rather than paralysis? There will always be competing priorities. There will always be an Aquilian battlecruiser or Aquilian death ray. We're going to have to address multiple challenges at once. We don't have the luxury of saying innovation will have to wait till we get past the current crisis. We don't get to operate in series. We also need to recognize that regulation is going to evolve. And we can't make the regulatory cycle so painful that we only take it on some X number of years. We're going to have to be agile. We've just witnessed a year where more Americans traveled than at any year in history. By air than at any point in history, breaking the record we set in 2023. The demand for air travel isn't waning, nor is the demand for unprecedented levels of safety. We can and must do both at an attractive price point. And I remain an optimist about our ability to innovate. If we look for reasons why it can't be done here, we will find them. This isn't a group that accepts the status quo, however, and they'll kick and scream and claw to a better outcome. So to the engineers here in the room, get to work. It's a great time to be alive. To the regulators and lawmakers here in the room, get to work. To our friends in the DOD, any DOD representatives, write some checks, please. And to our industry partners, build some parts, get them into test. Not next week, not tomorrow, now. Get them out and let's learn some stuff. Thank you for all your support and your tireless efforts, and the reward for your hard work will be lots more hard work. Before I take any questions, I did want to put up, for anybody who hasn't signed up, we are having a tour of our flight line just down the street here at our engines campus. It's an opportunity to see all of our test aircraft that we use to develop a lot of these systems, and we'll have on hand some of the very specific technologies we're developing for advanced air mobility for the eVTOL space. So please come by. We'd love to have you. We'd love to discuss more about what we're developing and why we think it enables the future. And with that, Angelo, I don't know if there's, you wanted to do a little Q&A before we introduce the mayor?
I can hear myself. If there's mics at the podiums, I can also hand a mic if you have any questions for Mr. Shilliday. But maybe I'll kick it off. So, sir, when you threw out the first pitch at the Diamondbacks game, I heard they clocked you at around 85. Is that true?
That is true. I think the only person who threw faster than me was Smokey the Bear, Baxter, the Diamondbacks. Yeah. I did have the privilege, because of some of our STEM efforts, to throw out a first pitch at the Diamondbacks game. I was going to have a long professional career in sports, but I had a lack of God-given talent. But it was a great opportunity that was given to me as a result of the STEM work we do with VFS and others.
Yeah.
And as a product of Arizona schools, as someone who learned to be an engineer here in Arizona schools, it's something I'm very passionate about, how we create that and how we drive the engineers that we're going to need for this and future industries. More than you asked for, Angelo.
We got a few minutes, so if you guys have questions, please do. Will, you want to ask a question? You got anything?
Yes, I have some question. As you mentioned very strongly the challenges around the world and that we don't have time to wait, which I think is a very good point, because coming from Europe, we have always the problem that we want to make it 100% bulletproof, which takes so long, where I think we had we could see now with Volocopter and Lilium 2, large companies had to stop. Maybe they will find no, or some said they will find no funding. We'll see where it ends. But don't you think one of the issues is that putting too much safety or try to put 100% safety at the first place will sometimes stop development? Like if we would have tried to put our up-to-date helicopter rules to helicopters at the beginning of last century, we would never have helicopters. What do you think to that?
So I think for me, the idea is where can we learn and gather data without putting people or structures at risk, right? We know we need to innovate before we need to test, we need to learn before we get to the 10 to the minus ninth. Where can we do that? We got lots of desert here in sunny Arizona, right? There's lots of opportunities for innovation zones and test areas where we can gather lots and lots of data without putting people or buildings at risk. That's where I think lots of other places, notably the UAE, notably China, have allowed some of these OEMs to thrive.
So you would agree that maybe doing some unmanned stuff before we get to the core air taxi business would be the solution also for companies for getting business model to work, because that's a big challenge.
Yeah, and success breeds success, right? The more data we gather, the more improvements to battery technology and mission mapping, I think the better that business case will materialize.
Great. Any more questions for Dave? It's a crowd of engineers, Mayor Gallego, so they're a little shy. Okay, Mike's got a question. All right.
Well, I was actually just going to tell the audience that all of these presentations are intended to be interactive, so encourage everybody to come up to a mic and ask questions throughout the event. We have another 10-minute schedule for Dave here.
Well, I'm happy to give it up to the mayor, and I'm happy to address any questions you have throughout the event as well.
Thank you. Okay.
All right.
We got a question.
First time here, never been to any event. I'm a battery guy, so lithium-ion batteries. So just curious to get your perspective on shortfalls of current technology with batteries and where they need to go to help out the industry.
More energy dense, I think is the phrase.
Not surprising there. And probably power density.
Yeah. So what I would say is we've seen very impressive advancements in battery technology. The closer you get to EIS of these vehicles, you solve this problem, you solve that problem, you bolt something on, you weld something on, they get heavier. So by the end of the mission, they're asking the battery to do a lot more than perhaps they had originally intended. That's not the battery manufacturer's fault, but the mission gets shortened as a result of that. I think everybody who's been at this a while predicted that, right? And so now the goal is, what's the mission we can serve? What can we learn with the vehicles we have, with the batteries we have, while it improves? I don't think anybody's betting on the come that there's going to be a 10x change in battery density in the next 5 years, and that's what everybody's business case is supported on. I think incremental gains would be appreciated, and I think hybrid electric, which you will be a massive contributor to, is probably the near-term opportunity, particularly for DoD.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
Sorry, I'm Willie. I didn't introduce
Who left
myself.
the mic with him?
I have one more question for you now, which is, like you mentioned, there are all these challenges. We just heard the battery thing. Do you think, because we have these global challenges with Europe, China, and United States, perhaps not collaborating like it should be if we want to have the fastest success. Do you think any of the problems can be solved in one of the markets itself, or do you think it's a global economy where we have to work together with let's say, the best battery manufacturer from China, with the best avionics manufacturer from US, and with the best airframe manufacturer from Europe? Or do you think really in one country can do all and the rest will stay behind?
I hope it's the former, right? I certainly believe the best outcomes come when all the best athletes throughout the world get to contribute their part, and we're able to integrate those systems together. For reasons of national security, you are going to see some indigenous vehicles, and they may have some of the best pieces, and they may not have some of the best pieces because they have to be resilient in a time of conflict. But if I had my druthers, it would be that, you know, we are able to reach in to all of those solutions being developed throughout the world and integrate them into one all-star vehicle that represents the best of what the world has to offer. Larry.
Good to see you, Dave. I wonder if you could comment, maybe the mayor can too, on an aspect of community adoption of urban air mobility or advanced air mobility, and what needs to get done from the community like this and from our government officials that would make the entire community ready to adopt vehicles flying at low altitude over large areas like Phoenix.
So I tried to touch on it because I do think it's so vital how we tell that story. Because a story of well-off people don't like sitting in traffic and they want to fly over traffic is not a compelling narrative. And it's also not a complete narrative, right? If we think about the missions that are going to be solved by this technology, they're massive. They're everything from national security to firefighting to first responders. And if we're not telling that story, we capable people who understand this technology aren't telling that story. Nobody is. And so we have to be advocates. We have to be that annoying person sitting next to you on a plane who won't stop talking about how you can fight fires, how you can spray crops, how you can make first responders safer with this technology, and, right? And open up regional economies and underutilized regional airports. Again, more than you asked for, Larry. But if we're not out telling that story, I would suggest that no one's going to tell it on our behalf. And then if you can educate wonderful advocates like the mayor or like Michelle Olson here in the front rows, they become a force multiplier and they go out and they tell that story for you. So do your part, Larry, and you know, evangelize with your local presence. All right, I think I am almost out of time, or I can take one more. Mike's giving me a shrug. That shrug means take one more, Dave.
Yeah, there you go. I thought there was, did somebody stand up over in the front that wanted to ask a question? No. I'll just ask, there was a couple questions that touched on like regulations. I know you guys have a whole 20-minute talk tomorrow on the regulatory readiness level document you guys come out. Can you just touch briefly on that and what the thinking was behind that?
Yeah, the RRL was a tool that Dan here in the room, and I'm not sure if Pulkit has made it yet, two folks on my team, we're really trying to, oh, there's Pulkit. We're really trying to give some sober adult analysis so that you could cut through a lot of what you read in the media about this milestone or this technology step or this certification step, so that you could see what that actually meant. Because, as I mentioned, if you put those notifications on, you get something every week that says, hey, the FAA has approved our path to manufacture, the FAA has agreed to this paper that we submitted. And it's hard to know when that's meaningful and when that's not, because in a lot of cases, none of these vehicles have been successfully through the whole process. And so the idea there was, how do we give a really thoughtful and sober set of checklist that people can say, is that meaningful progress, and where does that put them relative to their peers? It's not to ding anybody. It's not to advocate for anybody. We think it's useful for investors as much as it is for the public to say, how do I think about this company's maturity versus this company's maturity? But more than anything, it was just so that we're all speaking a common language. All right.